15,000-ton warship just emerged from 14 months of intensive surgery. And what the Navy did to this ship will change naval warfare forever. The USS Zumwalt, America's most expensive destroyer. For years, critics called it an $11 billion mistake, a floating embarrassment with guns that couldn't fire. But what just rolled out of that dry dock in Mississippi is something completely different. The Navy didn't just repair this ship, they transformed it into a weapon platform that no other nation on Earth possesses. And by the end of this video, I'll answer the 3 most asked questions about this incredible transformation. But first, you need to understand why this ship was built in the first place, and why it almost became the biggest failure in Navy history. The ship that shouldn't exist. Let's go back to the early 2000s. The Navy had a vision. They wanted to build the most advanced destroyer ever conceived, something that would dominate the seas for the next 50 years. The design they came up with looked like nothing else. A massive angular hull that resembles a stealth fighter more than a traditional warship. Every surface angled to deflect radar. Every line designed to make this 610-foot destroyer invisible to enemy detection. And it worked. This 15,000-ton warship has the radar signature of a small fishing boat. But stealth wasn't the only revolutionary feature. The Zumwalt generates 78 megawatts of electrical power. That's nearly as much as an entire aircraft carrier. The designers built in all this excess power for a specific reason. They knew future weapons would need massive amounts of electricity. Lasers, railguns, directed energy weapons, technologies that barely existed when the ship was designed. Here's where things get interesting. The Navy originally planned to build 32 of these destroyers. At that scale, the cost per ship would have been manageable, around $2 to $3 billion each. But then reality hit. The technology proved more difficult than expected. Systems didn't work as planned. Costs spiraled out of control. Congress looked at the budget and made a brutal decision. They cut the program from 32 ships down to just 3. 3 ships. That's it. When you spread all the research and development costs across only 3 hulls instead of 32, the math gets ugly fast. The lead ship, USS Zumwalt, ended up costing somewhere between $8 and $11 billion, depending on how you calculate it. That made it one of the most expensive warships ever built. And people started asking difficult questions. Was this ship worth the price? The Navy had an answer. They pointed to the ship's main weapon system, 2 massive 155mm advanced gun systems. These weren't ordinary naval guns. They could fire rocket-assisted projectiles over 60 nautical miles inland, farther than any naval gun in history. The Navy said these guns would provide devastating fire support for Marines landing on hostile shores. Each projectile could hit targets with GPS precision. It sounded revolutionary on paper. But then came the real problem: the ammunition. Each round for these advanced guns cost between $800,000 and $1 million. Let me repeat that. $1 million per shot. With only 3 ships in the class, the ammunition manufacturer couldn't produce enough rounds to bring the cost down. The Navy looked at those numbers and did the math. If they actually used these guns in combat, they'd burn through millions of dollars in minutes. So they made a shocking decision. They canceled the ammunition program entirely. The Zumwalt now had 2 enormous guns that couldn't fire a single shot, an $11 billion destroyer with no way to complete its primary mission. Defense analysts had a field day. Some called it the biggest procurement failure in Navy history. Others said it proved the Navy couldn't manage complex programs anymore. The ship became a symbol of everything wrong with defense spending. For several years, the Zumwalt sailed around with no clear purpose. It had advanced sensors, powerful engines, tremendous electrical capacity, but it lacked the weapons to justify its enormous cost. And here's what makes this story fascinating. That's when everything changed. The geopolitical shift. By 2021, the world looked very different than it did when the Zumwalt was designed. China had become increasingly aggressive. Russia was deploying new weapon systems. And both nations were doing something that worried Pentagon planners. They were fielding hypersonic missiles, weapons that travel faster than Mach 5, missiles that can strike targets in minutes with no warning, and most importantly, weapons that current air defense systems cannot reliably shoot down. The United States was falling behind in the hypersonic arms race. We needed a response, and we needed it fast. Someone in Navy leadership had a brilliant realization. The Zumwalt-class destroyers sitting in port had exactly what a hypersonic missile platform required: massive electrical power, advanced cooling systems, sophisticated combat computers, and most importantly, available space where those useless gun systems were taking up room. In late 2021, the Navy announced a bold plan. They would completely repurpose the Zumwalt class by ripping out the failed guns and installing launchers for America's new conventional prompt strike hypersonic missile. This wasn't a small modification. This required major surgery on an active warship. The Navy awarded Huntington Ingalls Industries a contract worth $154 million to make it happen. On August 19, 2023, the USS Zumwalt left its home port in San Diego. The ship made the long journey to Pascagoula, Mississippi, to Ingalls Shipbuilding, one of the few yards in America capable of handling this complex transformation. The Navy said it would take about 2 years, but they were wrong. The work would be completed in just 14 months, and what they accomplished during that time was extraordinary. Surgical precision. Bringing a 15,000-ton warship into dry dock requires precision most people can't comprehend. You can't just drive this thing into a parking spot. The Zumwalt entered the dry dock while it was still flooded with water. Multiple tugboats positioned the vessel over the exact center. The alignment has to be perfect. We're talking about tolerances measured in inches. If you get this wrong, the ship could suffer structural damage worth hundreds of millions of dollars. There's no room for error. Once positioned, workers placed massive support blocks at precisely calculated points along the hull. These blocks will bear the entire weight of the ship once the water drains. Each one has to be in exactly the right spot. Then the pumps start. Millions of gallons of water slowly drain from the dry dock. The Zumwalt gradually settles onto the support blocks. Engineers watch every sensor, every measurement, looking for any sign something isn't right. But Ingalls Shipbuilding didn't stop there. They did something unusual. They actually moved the entire ship onto a land-level facility, completely out of the water. This gave workers access to every part of the vessel with heavy equipment. It made the complex modifications far easier than working in a traditional dry dock. Now came the real challenge: removing the gun systems. These weren't small pieces of equipment. Each turret weighed hundreds of tons. The structure extended several decks down into the ship. The magazine and handling rooms went even deeper. Workers carefully cut through the deck. They removed the forward gun mount, then all the equipment below it. By March 2024, there was a massive hole where the gun system used to be. The aft gun received the same treatment, both gone, completely removed. This created the space for the new weapons. But installation wasn't as simple as filling a hole. Engineers had to reinforce the deck structure, install new foundations, integrate entirely new electrical systems, cooling systems, and fire control systems. The conventional prompt strike launchers are enormous. Each tube measures 87 inches across. That's over 7 feet in diameter, far larger than standard missile cells. The Navy installed 4 of these giant tubes where the forward gun used to sit. Each tube holds 3 hypersonic missiles. That gives the ship a total of 12 hypersonic strike weapons. The fabrication happened in parallel with the removal work. By July and August 2024, all 4 tubes arrived at the shipyard. Workers carefully lowered them into the prepared space, secured them to reinforced foundations, then integrated all the support systems. Meanwhile, Raytheon upgraded the ship's computing infrastructure. The combat system needed extensive software modifications to launch these new weapons. Lockheed Martin developed the launcher controls and targeting interfaces. Over 1,000 workers cycled through this project: welders, electricians, combat systems specialists, each contributing their expertise. The ship's crew stayed at the shipyard throughout, learning the new systems. By December 2024, the transformation was complete. Returning to the water. December 6, 2024, the day everyone had been waiting for. The USS Zumwalt was about to return to its natural element after 14 months of transformation. But getting a 15,000-ton destroyer back into the water is just as complex as taking it out. The ship had to be moved from the land facility back onto a floating dry dock platform. This involved hydraulic systems and precise coordination. Once positioned, preparations began for the actual undocking. Massive pumps started filling the dry dock, but this happened very gradually. Water flooding in too quickly could damage structures or create dangerous pressures against the hull. As the water level rose, engineers monitored everything. The Zumwalt slowly began to float, lifting evenly off its support blocks. This has to happen uniformly across the entire hull. Any uneven lifting could cause structural damage. Every measurement was verified, every sensor checked, nothing left to chance. Once the water inside matched the level outside, workers removed the caisson. That's the enormous watertight door that seals the dry dock. Now there was an opening for the ship to exit. Tugboats moved into position. Their crews are among the most skilled mariners in the world. They carefully pulled and pushed the destroyer, maneuvering it out of the dry dock into the main channel. The movement was incredibly slow. Feet per minute, not miles per hour. Every action deliberate and controlled. When you watch a ship this size move, it creates a visceral reaction. Something that weighs 15,000 tons shouldn't float. It defies logic. Yet there it was, the USS Zumwalt, back in the water, transformed, ready for a mission it was never originally designed for. What this ship can do now. To understand what the Navy accomplished, you need to see how the Zumwalt compares to other destroyers. The Arleigh Burke class forms the backbone of the surface fleet. These are proven, reliable warships. They cost about $2 billion new. They carry 90 to 96 missile cells, powerful radar systems, proven weapons. The Arleigh Burke class represents excellent value. These ships have deployed everywhere, participated in countless operations, proven their worth repeatedly. But they're fundamentally 1980s designs with upgrades. They lack the electrical power, stealth, and growth potential of newer ships. Then you have the Zumwalt. Before this upgrade, it existed in a strange middle ground, tremendous potential, but lacking the weapons to realize it. Now, everything has changed. The Zumwalt possesses capabilities no other surface combatant can match. The combination is devastating. Stealth that makes it nearly invisible. Advanced sensors that detect threats at extreme ranges. Massive electrical power for future weapons, and 12 hypersonic missiles that travel faster than Mach 5. These missiles can strike targets over 1,700 miles away in minutes, with virtually no warning. Current air defense systems cannot reliably intercept them. Let that sink in. This destroyer can sit off the coast and threaten targets deep inland or strike enemy ships at extreme ranges, all while remaining nearly undetectable. The ship still retains 80 vertical launch cells for traditional weapons, Tomahawk cruise missiles, SM-6 air defense missiles, anti-submarine rockets. It's a complete combat package. The strategic implications are profound. A Zumwalt operating in contested waters changes everything. Enemies know there's a destroyer out there somewhere. They know it can strike with virtually no warning, and they know they probably can't see it coming. That's the definition of a strategic asset. Why this matters. The Western Pacific has become increasingly contested. China continues to expand its military. Russia maintains significant forces. Iran threatens shipping lanes. North Korea remains unpredictable. The United States needs weapons that can strike quickly, penetrate advanced defenses, hold high-value targets at risk. Hypersonic missiles provide exactly those capabilities. The Navy plans to deploy the Zumwalt to the Western Pacific under 7th Fleet Command by late 2026 or early 2027. Its presence will send a clear message. The United States possesses capabilities that adversaries cannot match and cannot effectively defend against. Beyond immediate combat power, the Zumwalt serves another function. It's testing technologies for future warships. The Navy's next-generation destroyer program will incorporate lessons learned here. The integrated power system, the stealth shaping, the automation, all of it influences future designs. This ship went from being called a failure to becoming a pathfinder for the entire surface fleet. The people behind it. Behind all this technology are thousands of dedicated Americans, shipyard workers who spent 14 months executing complex modifications, the Navy crew who learned entirely new systems, the engineers who solved unprecedented challenges. These people took a ship that critics wrote off as a disaster and transformed it into potentially the most capable surface combatant afloat. Their work demonstrates something important about American capability. When we face challenges, we adapt. When technology doesn't work as planned, we find solutions. When critics say something's impossible, we prove them wrong. The Zumwalt story demonstrates the importance of perseverance. The Navy could have given up, could have decommissioned these ships early, written off the investment. Instead, they found a way to make them more valuable than originally envisioned. The USS Zumwalt, rolling out of dry dock, represents more than one ship returning to service. It symbolizes American determination and commitment to naval superiority. Now let me answer those 3 questions I mentioned at the beginning. First question, how exactly did the Navy modify this destroyer to carry hypersonic weapons? They completely removed both failed gun systems, then installed 4 massive launch tubes, each 87 inches in diameter. Each tube holds 3 missiles for a total of 12 hypersonic strike weapons. Second question, what strategic role will this ship serve? The Zumwalt becomes a unique long-range precision strike platform. It can threaten high-value targets at extreme distances while remaining nearly undetectable. No other surface combatant has this combination of stealth and strike range. Third question, How do you actually return such a massive warship to water? It's an engineering feat. You flood the dry dock gradually over many hours. Let the ship float evenly off its support blocks. Then use skilled tugboat crews to carefully maneuver it out. Everything measured in inches and feet, not yards and miles. The USS Zumwalt will conduct sea trials throughout 2025, including the first live firing of a hypersonic missile from its deck. By 2026, it deploys to the Western Pacific with weapons no enemy can match. This story reminds us why America maintains the finest Navy in the world. We have the industrial capacity, the technical expertise, the resources to solve problems that would defeat other nations. We learn from setbacks, adapt to challenges, come back stronger. An $11 billion mistake just became one of the most lethal warships sailing today. The USS Zumwalt and her crew will soon protect American interests across the world's oceans, promoting peace through strength. That's something worth being proud of.